Find out on this episode of LED Live.
Hey everybody, welcome back to LED Live. We get to expose some darkness with the light of Christ. You guys are gonna wanna hear this message because we're gonna discuss a topic that is needed in our world. It's about sexuality.
Okay, what'd he just say?
What?
I said, what'd he just say?
He said what?
I have no idea. That's why I'm asking you what he just said.
I know that, and I'm saying he said what?
I know that. Oh, he said what?
Yes.
Keith, give us a little preference on what we're gonna talk about today.
So today we're talking about a presentation I named Love is What, and it's a mature topic. That's why we have the rating on the screen for those parents out there. You should never just watch anything with your kid the first time. You should always watch it before you watch with your child.
Yeah, good advice, for sure.
We're not here to do anything, graphically explicit or anything but we're just talking about things that maybe your child shouldn't be exposed to yet. And we want you to make that decision on when you talk to them about those things. So just a warning, a little disclaimer so that, you don't just have your 10-year-old, on our channel whenever they want.
Yeah.
Right. You want to screen these programs.
Sorry guys, my phone was buzzing. And the reality of the situation is the world is pumping misinformation about sexuality to the kids. So they're getting mixed messages already, and trust me, by age 10 years old, probably a lot of them have been exposed more than you wish they were. So we need to discuss this kind of topic. We need to know, how do we begin to approach this? How do we begin to protect ourselves against this? So that's why we really wanted to do this type of show. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get into it. We're going to look at this topic of sexuality through the lens of the Bible. And today we're going to look at a number of statistics and, just reports from different watchdog groups out there. But I want to start with this verse from the Bible. It's from Ecclesiastes 2:10, and it says, "Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my reward from all my labor." I find this verse is very descriptive of our society today.
Yeah.
We generally do not hesitate to withhold, anything before our eyes. It's a society where it's just pretty much anything goes. And discretion is going out the window. And so we need to take some time, like Solomon did, and reflect and say, what am I putting before my eyes? And what impact is that having upon my life? Bill Gates made an interesting statement a few years ago. He said, content is king.
True.
And, we probably agree with that, being in the media industry ourselves.
Sure.
But when he said content is king, he said this in a context of the media industry. And so he added to this, he said, content is where I expect much of the real money to be made on the internet, just as it was in broadcasting. And we see that trend happening today. A lot of the money today is being made on the internet. You have people that are making millions of dollars.
On YouTube.
Yeah.
Amazon.
It's just amazing.
Yeah,
And-
you you're shopping from home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
And some of these people, they don't even do anything worthwhile.
Right?
Oh man, I'm gonna open this box and show
Yeah.
you what I got. Hey, millions of
dollars.
views. Ooh.
Yeah.
Seriously, right?
But reflecting on his statement, if content is king, we should be concerned about the content, because the content then will have influence. Let's talk about the content. 72% of teens think that watching TV with a lot of sexual content influences their peers' behavior somewhat or a lot.
That's pretty.
That's teens saying this.
That's
that's
teens.
pretty shocking. I'm
That's
surprised. Most of them say it don't affect me. I do this because I want to, or whatever.
Now, these are teens of my generation. This was published, I think, in 2001. So this is a little bit after I would have graduated from high school. And so that's the context. I know I'm giving my age away. That's the context of when this was written in. And this comes from a medical journal. And I don't think anything has changed. In fact, I would say since that time, if anything, it's probably getting worse.
Oh yeah. You look at studies, I don't know if you're going to show this, but you look at studies from even 10, 15 years ago, and the frequency that they were exposed to sexual content or even just, imagery has just gone through the roof.
Yeah, and we are going to look at some of that. This is one that Common Sense Media reported. They said between 1998 and 2005, the number of sexual scenes on TV nearly doubled.
Wow.
Now, it's not 1998 anymore. In fact, we're already past 2018. So this is a little bit old, but you could see that even back then, the pace is picking up, right?
Those are my high school days, man. What are you saying?
Yeah, I know, me too, right? Here's another one from another medical journal. It said, adolescents use the media as sources of information about sex, drugs, AIDS, and violence, as well as help to learn how to behave in relationships.
I've been to a lot of youth speaking places where they have a lot of different speakers talking about different topics, and they have like breakout rooms. And there's always a relationship component when it comes to like big youth groups and stuff. And they are the most attended. I mean, you should see the line out the door of kids trying to get in and listen to what topic the Bible has to say about relationships and stuff. So this is not a shocker.
It's the biggest decision you're going to make, one of the biggest decisions you're going to make in your life partner. And not even just life partner, throughout your whole life. It's all about relationships, how you connect with people, how you communicate with people. So it would make sense that that's well attended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then if this is such a big influencer on your behavior, then obviously what you're watching becomes extremely important, right?
It's for all the naysayers out there that say, oh, what I watch doesn't affect me, it's just entertainment.
I wonder what happened though, like the difference between the 2001 teens versus nowadays. Because 72% believe that they were being affected. Nowadays, it's like, oh, I'm not being affected. So,
well, I mean, I think if you just observe like pop culture entertainment, the sexual content has doubled, right? But you think about the access that kids have to porn and other things nowadays. I mean, it's just through the roof. So I would say that this generation is probably overly sexually charged more than even previous generations.
Do you think they're saying they're not being affected because it's so normal nowadays? So it's like, how can I be affected if it's normal? Whereas before it wasn't normal, so you can see the effect because society's actually shifting.
I think every generation says it doesn't affect me. Everybody wants to believe it doesn't affect them. Everybody wants to believe they're above something having an effect on them.
Right. Look at the 60s, man. Everybody was like, it's okay, nothing's gonna be a problem. And all of a sudden, now you've got a fallout of problems from the 60s. And even now, this generation will look back on that and say, wow, dude, they messed some stuff up back there and we are paying the price for it. So, it may take years for the next generation to see the problems that we have now. But I think everything affects us.
So primetime TV, this was 30 years ago, okay? 30 years ago, we said there were 143 incidents of sexual behavior on network television. And it's a surprising source, Planned Parenthood put that statistic out.
So this is in 1 year's time, there was 143 incidents of sexual behavior on...
Yeah, during the 1987 to 1988 season.
On normal airwave television, like not...
Yeah, network TV.
Page, okay.
Yeah. Network TV. So I'm showing all these statistics from yesteryear just so that when we move forward, we'll see, where are things at now. I say media is education, and being an educational tool, what are we learning? Obviously, teens relate media as an educational tool because they say, well, this is where I go to learn about violence. This is where I go to learn about sex, AIDS, drugs, whatever. So we know it's an educational tool.
I'm sure there's a YouTube video how to do all
everything.
This.
It's an exhausting list.
Right.
So not that long ago, less than a year ago, 2018, there was a group called the Parents Television Council, and they published a study about media and specifically on family comedies. And they wanted to see what kind of sexual content are kids being exposed to through that avenue. Now, family comedies, you would think that's supposed to be family friendly.
Yeah.
Should be safe for pretty much anybody. I mean, we have ratings on television, right? And those ratings, allow us to see what's in the different programs. And so let's see as we go through this what they found out. 80% of all primetime broadcast network family comedies analyzed in this study contained instances of adults using explicit sexual dialogue in front of children.
Wow.
And child viewers of supposed family comedies are routinely exposed to dialogue and scenarios such as
Now, I remember when I was a kid, do you guys remember a television show called Three's Company?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nope.
Nope.
You know, I don't know what you're going to say, but I recently watched that thinking, oh, this might be clean. It's kind of back in the day.
There was so many sexual references and
The
all
whole
kinds of
time.
like terrible things put in that. And I remember that was sold to people as a family-friendly show. So, you know, even when we were kids, they were sliding all those kind of things in there.
I often kind of talk about this change over time because I grew up on shows like Full House, Family Matters. I mean, Family Matters, Steve Urkel accepted Christ in a church. Like, you would never see that today.
Wow.
And, you know, like on Full House, maybe the girl gets caught drinking a beer and they have family intervention. She's crying, I'll never do it again, Dad. It ruined my life. One beer, you know. Now the mother is selling weed to the kids at the high school, and like
They're having Skittles parties and
yeah, and I mean it even progressed to like Married with Children, where the dad's just sitting there drinking a beer and you know doesn't like his wife, and I actually could see the world around me just transform with that. I mean, my own household, we actually used to have some standards about, oh, we're not going to watch that or do this, and as we laxed on those things, well, a beer with dinner is normal or whatever, you know, it just, what you see becomes the norm.
Interesting.
These are the shows that they analyzed from several different networks: ABC, CBS, Fox, NBC, and CW. And you can see there's a number of shows on here, wide variety. Some of them you probably recognize more than others, but like The Simpsons, for example, The Family Guy, and there's a number on it, you know, Roseanne, different shows. So what did they find out about all these different shows? Well, he said this: the discussions of sex have been scientifically proven to influence teens in their own sexual behavior at a time when Hollywood is increasingly conscious of the harm done by crude, sexually harassing language used in front of women and is taking steps to reduce or eliminate it. It is tragic that the entertainment industry remains oblivious to the effect of sexualizing talk in front of children, both child actors and child viewers at home. And then they said numerous researchers have reported strong correlations between viewing sex on TV and subsequent attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors, with television serving as a kind of sexual super peer for early maturing teens.
Wow.
I mean, you think about the influence that you know, teens are paying attention to how everyone else is dressing, how everyone else is being, and now you've got this like super concentrated, super exciting, you know, television. The way that it plays out is they take away all of the boring moments. I mean, life does not happen like that. And so they're showing you only these exciting parts of the stories, which is heightening that sensory with young people, and they're sitting there like soaking this up. I mean, for sure, this has to have an effect on them.
I like the little graphic that they used at the end to kind of in their report, and it said, because our children are watching. You know, there's all kinds of kids watching, and I feel bad for all these children that, you know, they have all this unrestricted access and the things that they can stumble onto completely innocently. You have to be careful what you type directly into a web browser, you know. I remember when I was 14 at school, I made the mistake of typing a direct address into a web browser thinking, I am going to do a report on the White House. I thought, .com. You just type white. I didn't understand .gov, .net, all those at that time. I was 14. I mean, we just had computers at school. And I did not get the White House. You know, I got something else, and I was like quickly shutting my computer, and I'm like, I'm not supposed to be seeing this, you know? But it's so easy to access that kind of content, and even more so now. You know, you just type the wrong word into a search engine, and up can pop all manner of pictures and video. So, I thought this was interesting doing this research. I found that 10 very adult films were rated G by Netflix in 2017.
Not even PG.
Rated G, yes.
Dude.
Now, I can't say that that's the case now. It could be that Netflix is completely changed since this information has come out. But at that time, just a short time ago, within the last couple of years, you could find all of this content rated G on Netflix.
No
and you can
way,
see there's some very explicit terms on the screen.
Okay,
I
the
mean,
word in the title shouldn't even be on a G movie.
exactly.
What
The word
G
in the
movie
title.
has the word porn in it?
So wait a minute. After Porn Ends is a G-rated Netflix show.
As of 2017, it was. I don't know if it still is, but at one time you could get access to these G-rated
Okay.
shows.
I mean, it seems like the
Brazilian
title
Call
alone
Girl?
should cause it to have a different rating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Just the title
my
alone.
question would be, has Netflix always been a family streaming service? And what I mean by that is they've just added on a whole bunch of categories. And children is one of them with all the cartoons and stuff. Was that always there? Did it begin like that? Did they change this because they added a children's section, a family section?
I can't say I know all the answers to that. I'm not very Netflix savvy.
Okay.
But you don't
I
put
have
a
an
G rated on
account.
this thing.
True.
But I don't use it very much. I'll go on there every once in a while to look something up. But, so I don't know. And
Yeah,
I don't
out of
know if you click on
curiosity,
that.
just-
I know when I log in, I have the children's box, but I've never clicked on that because I have no need to for myself. And I don't just let my children have free access to Netflix. So for me, it's never been relevant, that question in my own life, But I don't know. Maybe somebody who knows how Netflix works can comment below. I have no idea. It's startling, nonetheless, to think that you could just get access to this as a G-rated.
I wouldn't want
content.
this screen on my TV when
Exactly.
when like a neighbor comes in and be like, "What are you watching?" They're just G-rated movies here. Just looking at the
Exactly.
list.
Yeah. So, what about contributions from longer-standing shows that have made their mark on pop culture, right? Like The Simpsons.
I mean, this show is terrible.
Yeah.
The Simpsons has notoriously had a lot of content that you don't want your kids exposed to. Everything from secret societies to totally bashing God to, all sorts of sexual innuendos.
I'm going to go through a number of them here. You can feel free to comment there.
Question. Oh, are all of these shows labeled family-friendly shows?
I wouldn't say that they are, but that
They're
The
portraying a
Simpsons
family.
was on that list
Of,
that the Parents Television Council went through that are family comedies.
oh, okay.
This one necessarily wouldn't be considered a family comedy, but still, it's out there, it's freely accessible. Unless you're using, I guess, a V-chip on your television or, being very careful, your kid can just access this.
You know what I think is interesting is Ben Shapiro actually interviewed one of the writers for this show, Desperate Housewives.
One of the things I'm proudest about is the addition of the neighbors, the gay neighbors on Wisteria Lane, because they're there, they're a part of the neighborhood, no one seems to notice it. And I think that just having gay neighbors be a part of the street, and I don't really talk about their sexuality much. To me, that became its own political statement, which is, see, you can have gay neighbors and they can be perfectly fine and fit in with the rest of the folks. And it doesn't change anything. And you kind of hope that you're preparing the way, planting little seeds in the minds of people who sometime over the next few years are going to have gay neighbors buy a house on their street. And for me, that's the most effective political message, is that it's not particularly aggressive. It's just there, and it's slowly changing a perception.
Like there was that much purposeful thought going into it, and that kind of thing actually has an influence,
But it's just a show,
But it's just a show.
There's no
But
intent.
people watch it and they go, this is normal.
Yeah.
So if they show really non-normal things, like dad's got 3 wives and this and that. That then seals into the population that is normal.
Yeah.
I ran across a quote recently from Psychology Today. A guy with a PhD in psychology said, it's really amazing that people think that with television, we have these commercials, that we believe affect people. We sell advertising. Why do we sell advertising? Because it works, right? It affects people. But we believe that the hour-long programming sandwiched in between the commercials has no effect on people.
Yeah. Wow.
It doesn't make sense. It's inconsistent logic, right?
That's a very good point, because the commercial's so short and it affects you so powerfully that they invest millions of dollars for
so why not the
seconds
show?
of time.
And just like how commercials work, it's through familiarity with that product. When you see that brand over and over and over and over and over again, when you go to the store, we all gravitate to things that are familiar to us. So if you watch a lot of misportrayals of what the family unit looks like, misportrayals of sexuality, that becomes normal to you, and you begin to think that that's just okay.
So then when you get in a situation where you have what is normal or biblically right, that doesn't even seem exciting anymore. I thought it was going to be like what I was seeing on TV. You know?
Right.
Yeah. So we wind up with shows like Modern Family, which is nothing like Leave It to Beaver.
Right. And isn't this a picture of society, of what our families really are like today? So they say life imitates art, or is it that art is imitating life? I mean, I think both are playing off of each other.
Yeah, definitely. Game of Thrones, if you've heard of this show, imagine, unless you're living under a rock, you've probably heard of Game of Thrones. You know, I was looking at an article, and I can't remember who it was by. It was an unusual source. I should say it was a source I didn't expect it from. They had an article about the whole gamut of Game of Thrones relationships. And there was everything. I mean, it was everything.
There's incest. The actual first episode of Game of Thrones started out with a rape scene. And it's like, there's rape, there's incest, there's cheating, there's kill. I mean, it's like the
homosexuality.
there's homosexuality, there's every kind of...
This is probably like the most watched show right now, right?
Right.
Well,
I mean,
not
maybe
anymore,
not just a year ago.
Ended, but I mean, it was definitely one of the most watched ever.
So you think about that. The most watched show is probably the worst show up to date.
Of course, there's, ones that are a little more blatant. They're not hiding it, right?
No.
And then there's this. You've probably heard of this, 50 Shades of Grey. Made a lot of headlines for its content. And then, recently we did a program on Hollywood and politics, right? And how, the Unplanned movie was basically censored in some ways. So it's amazing how certain things are censored, certain things are pushed to the back.
Certain things are rated R.
Yeah, certain things are rated R, but most of these, the content that's in them.
What's really awkward is being on an airplane and somebody's watching like Game of Thrones and there's like a sex scene and it's like, you're always just kind of like, oh my goodness, there's like tons of people around. This is super awkward. Right. But if I've seen this thing on tons of planes and people like have no problem watching those kind of scenes with all sorts of people around. So, that should give you a telltale sign of where our society's at.
For sure. Okay. So even shows that we might agree show love in a positive context, there are still significant problems. And Relevant Magazine they did an article and they summed it up this way. They said, talking about the depiction of love, concentrated love in a short amount of time without all the daily. So in other words, whenever you're watching all this programming on TV, you're only seeing these very concentrated moments in time. You don't see all the day-to-day. It's not like, okay, these two people are in love and they're doing the dishes together and, they're going on a walk and, the guy's helping fold the laundry. You don't see any of that stuff. All you see is the concentrated portions that they want you to see, the ones that are overly sexualized.
Yeah, that's a real thing. I was listening to Family Radio and there was a episode of this doctor, I forget his name, but he was making the connection interesting to Disney characters and Disney princesses and how that's messing with the minds of little girls because they grow up and then they have this perception of what they want in a relationship, what they want love to be, and then it doesn't work out because that's not realistic, and then either they end up settling, which is bad, which is the worst because they get something that they should not stand for to begin with, or they just said, I'm done with this, and they actually don't give love a shot at all, and they end up just being alone.
It's like, what? He's not rich? He doesn't have like muscles? What's
wrong with guys?
I've actually heard a lot of like radio programs and stuff about marriage, and that's the way it was. Like the woman months into the marriage is like, this is not what I thought it was going to be, and in reality, there's nothing wrong with the marriage. It's a normal marriage, but they just had these super high expectations that it didn't meet. And they think, well, the problem is him, so I'm going to move on to the next guy. And guess what? Months into that marriage, the same thing. I mean, the marriage is all about sacrifice and sticking with it and working through it and communication.
So what's up with that? Why are the girls? What's up with the guys? What's happening with you guys?
Guys, we're simple, man. You can keep us happy. That's why. Most of the time.
No surprise, they also said that the programs were highly sexualized. They also said what you're seeing is the beginning of the relationship at the end of the program, right? So things are just now getting started by the time this is all developed. You're not seeing the rest of it, right?
I mean, like the wedding is just before the credits roll and stuff.
Yeah, or they're just getting together by the end of the movie. They finally realize they love each other, and then it's supposed to be happily ever after that.
I mean, that's how marriage is, though. There's this honeymoon stage where all you see is red. I mean, I can remember marrying my wife and thinking that this woman cannot do anything wrong. She is literally perfect. Yeah. And then 1 year rolled around, and I was like, why did this person come in my life? I'm sure she was thinking the same thing, but the love takes a different form. I think it's the same as our relationship with God as well. We have this really fast, passionate beginning with God, right? Everything is just like, boom, boom, boom. Everything's blowing up, and you're starting to see all these things, and you're really super passionate about God. And then the daily sets in, and the relationship takes a different form, and you need that kind of daily maintenance, just like in a real relationship, you need that daily maintenance. So
date night.
Yeah,
Which segues really well into their next point. When all the fancy stuff fades, am I still in love? Right?
Yeah.
You find yourself asking yourself that. Am I really in love? I don't think in my marriage I had so much of that. We had probably a slightly different experience, and yet similar in many ways to other people. People used to tell us, it gets hard about 10 years when you have kids. And for us, it was about that, about 10 years. I know for me specifically, I was having a hard time. It's like, she doesn't pay attention to me anymore. What's going on? But I think, I'm not going to say I didn't have high expectations, but I don't think I had any grandiose expectations. I think I was probably a little more grounded in, what marriage was going to be like. It was for me. Not that I didn't have great expectations for my wife, but it was probably better for me at the beginning, than what I projected.
I think is normal. Everything I've heard, that's normal.
Yeah.
Well, for each of you, where do you think you got your expectations from?
Likely media.
Yeah.
Totally princess stories.
My wife says that.
I never grew up on Disney, but.
Well, like you were saying, why is it girls? Girls are always looking for this thing like romance and all this. Guys, we don't really look at that. But I think the media does play on that a lot. The woman, she's trying to look as attractive as she can to get the guy that's got the money, and that's what the media pushes. So you got the guy trying to make all the money by working, but then when you get a marriage, then it's like, you work too much. Well, I'm trying to get the money to make you happy, and so you have this trophy wife. So it's really a bad combination.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, they called it emotional pornography, which I thought was a really interesting term.
That's clever.
Very clever.
I don't know if I'm skipping ahead here, but where should we get our influences from? Is that revealed later on?
Well, let's talk about it. Where should we get our influences from? I mean, you're bringing the question. Let's tackle it. Where have your influences come from?
I would have to say media as well.
But where should they come from, right?
Also,
and that's the bigger question.
School as well, though, oddly enough.
Okay.
The conversations that are had in school, and even people's reactions to certain situations. If a student would come and say, man, this happened in my household, and then there's a reaction in my peer group. I was like, well, that's interesting. Like, maybe this is how we should act in this situation. Or,
But then what's influencing your peers?
I would assume their parents. See, that's why it's kind of difficult for me. I know it should come from your parents and how they interact with each other and things like that. But coming from a single parent household, that was quite interesting for me to figure out. So I'm assuming that those kids would come and we would discuss in school would get it from their households. But overall, we were all pretty much getting a big chunk from the movies we would watch and the TV shows.
So yeah. I know we've had this conversation before. Would you say church had a big influence on you over relationships? like seen relationships from your church members, or interacting with friends as parents or anything like that. I think that the model comes from the home, but not always it's realistic that you have that model in the home, such as your case. And I think that the media probably plays a big influence into what your ideals play out, or what you understand as a proper context of a relationship. And even in many homes, they get a wrong picture of it in those homes. I come from a broken home. My parents divorced when I was little, and so I didn't have quite a clear picture of it as well from my family unit.
Right.
And I would say probably my ideas were largely shaped from movies.
Right. I don't know, just to see it doesn't mean you understand it. So
Right.
I would see certain things in church, but it wasn't something that I would really dwell on. Usually the conclusion was, oh, well, that's not my reality. That's not what I have, so whatever, just move on. It looked nice, but I didn't delve into it to the fact, or to the extent where I would go ask questions, or I would really understand what was happening between the parents. I think what helped shape my understanding of especially an emotional relationship between a man and a woman, or how a man should treat a woman, was actually in Pathfinders. We would have chivalry classes and
Wow.
Just general discussions where an adult was involved in the discussion. It wasn't just peers talking amongst themselves. That was a setting where I was able to ask questions and listen to adult responses. I think that's important, and not just a kid looking all the time, because then a kid can draw their own conclusions, or maybe even just block it out completely, and that doesn't help.
Right.
Yeah, so that's why I hesitated answering your question about church.
Yeah, I often try to picture a world that maybe in the 50s, an EMP went off or something, and it affected just media though somehow. Like, where would we be right now if there was no media to influence the world? Like, how would people dress? How would they talk?
You would be influenced by the people that you observe around
Exactly,
you.
like
in your
community. And like you said, like, that's crazy. Like, there's a class about chivalry. Imagine if you went to school and there was a Christian counselor teaching you about this is what a marriage should look like, instead of, well, sex can be done like this, and here's some condoms, and I know you're only 5, but we're going to teach you this crazy thing,
That's an
like,
interesting
whoa.
point.
Now, I don't want to totally beat up media, because what if the media was portraying a proper context of television? I mean, what would that do to family units in society? Because there's a lot of families that they spend dinner watching television and those sitcoms that are around that prime time hour. And, I wouldn't beat up media so bad if they were proper portrayals of it. No. But the fact that it's most often this misportrayal broken down, I think, like, why watching Crazy, we literally become crazy. Yeah. That makes sense.
It seems real controlled. And even like the school system, the reason we don't have these chivalry classes in public school, well, they're not Christian schools, they're teaching you evolution and Big Bang, and I mean, they're godless schools. So.
Right.
I guess if we were to be specific, we should say mainstream media doesn't have a right portrayal, because they're really just looking for the money, and sex sells, so that's what's going to be in front of your face. Right. But if you just did a little bit of research, I'm sure there's plenty of good resources to enjoy with your family.
It matters what you watch. Be careful with what you watch. It's not necessarily that you're just watching something. It's just make positive choices for that.
Right.
I would agree with you.
I think all the craziness that we've been talking about ends us up at the point where we have movies like Divorce Party. Says Kiss This Marriage Goodbye, where the guy, he has a party to celebrate his divorce.
Is his ex-wife at the party? Are they both celebrating, or?
I don't think they're both celebrating.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't get that from the.
Because I have seen stuff like that. I mean, I've seen people at end of the couple is smiling as they have their divorce paper, and that goes on Instagram and stuff, and it's like they're celebrating it.
Yeah. But the fact that people are even okay with this is just, it's sad.
Yeah, it is.
A broken marriage is nothing to celebrate at all. It's and the real losers of these situations, especially if there's kids involved, is the kids.
Yeah.
Definitely. Always.
All right, so let's take some time to talk a little bit about music.
Touchy.
Touchy. Do you think music has had an effect on society over time. We want to take a look at that. Here is a report from Sage Oben. It says themes of lust and love in popular music lyrics from 1971 to 2011. So we've got a pretty good span there, to take a look at. So let's see what we found out in 40 years. What do you notice about this graph? You have lust with the solid diamonds, and you have love with the dotted squares.
Wow.
What's happening over time?
Love's coming down, lust's going up.
These are the themes that are changing over time. And when did they start to really kind of change and switch positions? Sometime between 2001, well, it looks like after 2006. Yeah. It's about 2007, 8. We really started to see that flip just switch. Now, in the same report, they analyzed what about if we factor in the songs which take both into account? Because there's songs that talk about lust and love together, and then there's songs that are just predominantly lust and songs that are predominantly love. Then what happens to our chart? And you can see here that still the ones that are lust only are more predominant than the other two themes together. So lust is on the rise as a theme in music.
And just to define the difference between lust and love, it's like the two polar opposite ends of the spectrum. Love is very giving, right? What can I give you? For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son, right? Lust is taking. Yeah. 50 Shades of Grey, I'm going to take it from you and I'm going to tie you up. It's like, it's a very opposite end of the spectrum, but yet it's sold to you in this quasi, this is love, under the garb of love, and it's not love. It's actually something totally opposite. It's
what
selfish.
Can I get out of it?
It's selfish love is really what it is.
Should one go without the other?
I think we should have a pure form of love in our relationship, yeah.
Well, if both people love, then you don't have to worry about what you can get because that person wants to give to you.
That's right.
Yeah.
So here's another report, Psychology of Music. What has America been singing about? Trends and themes in the U.S. top 40 songs from 1960 to 2010. So this one is a 50-year span study. What do we discover from this? And here we can see a chart with lots of data on it. Hone in on the top two rows here. You have relationships and love from the 60s forward at the end, but more important is the change. Then look at sex versus sexual desire below that. Started out about 18% and went to 41.7%. So huge change, more than doubled, whereas relationships and love has been on maybe a slow, steady decline, but not by much. In fact, it maybe isn't statistically enough to say that it's really changed all that much, but definitely sex and sexual desire has been climbing. And as I look at this, it's been climbing along with like wealth and status, dance and dancing, but definitely the most dramatic change, I would say, is in sex and sexual desire in music over the last 50 years.
It looks like there's like a pendulum effect in this stuff every 10 years. It's kind of like not so high, then really high, then back down. Like look at religion, the 60s, nobody's talking about God. 70s, they're talking about God again. The 80s, not really.
Right.
90s, 90s was my childhood, and I feel like there was a lot of God-influenced stuff.
So you think
more than
it's
now.
consistent to what's relevant? Because look at race and ethnicity. From the 60s, 0.5 to the 2000s, 11.7.
Yeah, but then you take a look at something like death. Death is pretty much always relevant.
Sure. Okay.
And it has a much bigger jump into the 90s and then goes down in the 2000s.
What's driving this?
Culture, society, the collective
The Illuminati.
mindset of the people, but it's definitely a reflection of what we're about. It's what we sing about. It's what we're about. It's what we're into. It's what we believe. It's what we like. It's what's affecting us,
Yeah. Music is often a reflection of what's in our hearts. It's what's coming out.
So my takeaway from that is over the past 40, 50 years, sexual themes have not increased, and that there has been a significant increase in the proportion of songs with the themes of lust, with the absence of love and romantic feelings. Sexuality has remained pretty much constant across the board, But while it's remained constant, you have a much higher proportion of songs with lust and sexual desire and those kinds of things over love. You know, we're still singing about, you know, love, but the context of that love has changed. What it means to us has changed over time.
I think it's very dangerous if this is all someone has to go off of, if this is their main influence, if you can go back to the statistics, because the main thing talked about is lust, not the effects of it, what happens after it. You know, when two people unite in love, man and a woman, what's usually what comes next is the development of a family. But you have love and relationships all the way up here being talked about, and look, family is all the way down here barely being talked about. Or what about, you know, violence that comes out of lust and I will take, not thinking of how it will affect the other person. Violence can break out, you know, all these different things. Understanding your personal identity before even looking for love and relationships is just, you know, let's focus on this and not all this other stuff, and this other stuff is real life. And I feel like...
But good times and partying on the rise.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I wonder how they kind of judged what was love or lust, because you have songs where they're like, I saw you at the club, I fell right in love, or something like, I knew right then that moment we fell in love, and that night we went home. You know?
Yeah, I know studies like this will have specific criteria that they define beforehand, you know, to determine that. We also learned that themes of lust and the absence of love were especially prevalent in hip hop and rap music as a particular genre, like well above other genres. So, this is what the report said. These shifts in themes found in popular music may both influence cultural norms and shifts. This is their conclusion. I think, you know, if we think about that, it's really kind of self-evident, you know? We get that media affects us. I mean, people can deny that. We talk about that, you know, it doesn't affect me. But we look at what's, you know, things that are prevalent in our lives, like media, we can see the change happening. We can see the effect happening over time. So it's very hard, I think, to deny that this has no effect on us at all. They also said that there has been acceptance of sexuality outside of love relationships. And that's how we wind up with music videos like Despacito. It's in Spanish, so unless you know Spanish really well or you translate the lyrics, what is that thing about? If you watch it visually, have any of you seen
Is that
the
the
music
one
video?
with the most views ever? on
Yeah, this
YouTube?
is the number one YouTube video of all time. I think it broke that record in 7 months.
Yeah. Because of it overly sexualized content, I guarantee you, if you took the woman out of the music video, it would not be a top music video.
Yeah, probably not.
I don't think I could, in good conscience, read the translated lyrics on the show. It's pretty explicit.
So what is Despacito in Spanish? I'm desperate?
I don't know.
What?
Slow.
Slow?
Okay. So it means slow.
Means slow. Okay.
Like, that's very ambiguous.
Right.
And then you have songs like Shape of You by Ed Sheeran. In this, it describes a relationship that begins. Do you know where it begins?
The club isn't the best place to find the lovers, so the bar is where I go. Me and my friends at the table doing shots, tripping fast, and then we talk slow.
And then it quickly leads to the bedroom. Wow. That's pretty much the song. Before long, the two people are dating, the woman's body and the man's impetuosity bring them together. And then you have songs like Sugar by Maroon 5 that are also in the same vein with very suggestive lyrics and also artwork. And so I think what we're seeing is a very, you know, cause and effect relationship here. This is from the journal Pediatrics. The title of the article was Sexuality, Contraception in the Media, the Council on Communications and Media. It said virtually every R-rated TV movie or teen movie since the 1980s has contained at least one nude scene, and often several instances of sexual intercourse. For example, American Pie movie series.
That came right to my mind.
What's that?
That came right to my mind, the American Pie.
Yeah.
Like, we saw the interview of like 13-year-old kids, oh, I like the lesbian scene or whatever.
And then they continued by saying teen movies also contain distorted views of romance and normal adolescent sexuality. So probably the most prominent pediatric journal that there is, the journal Pediatrics and Medicine, this is what they're saying.
Man.
A bunch of doctors, they're like, look, this is what's happening. This is what you need to take note of as parents. If we have a bunch of PhD professionals, you know, MDs, noticing this in our society, we can probably tout all day long, oh, it doesn't affect me. Your doctor thinks it does. They also said teen magazines are popular with pre-adolescent and adolescent girls and devote an average of 2.5 pages per issue into sexual topics. Coverage of sex as a health issue in magazines is more common than on TV, but the overarching focus seems to be on deciding when to lose one's virginity. If your daughter is interested in those teen magazines, buyer beware, right? Because they're probably not going to be lining up with your Christian beliefs, almost guaranteed. It's not just in music, it's in magazines as well.
What was it in the teen magazine that you guys were bringing up the other day?
Oh, Teen Vogue.
Teen Vogue, what was it?
Sex work is real work.
Yep.
An article in Teen Vogue that was talking about the sexual, like as in prostitution.
They were saying that what's the difference between a physician, a doctor, talking about sex and getting paid for that, or discussing sex or counseling on sex and getting paid for that? What's the difference between that person and a sex worker?
A big difference.
Wow.
A big difference.
Well, that's your opinion and they have theirs.
Honey, I'm going to the doctor. Wink.
I mean,
My
if you're going
counselor.
to a doctor to learn about something to do with sexuality or some issue, if you're working it out on the street, I mean, that's like two totally different ball fields.
Oh.
Wow.
They might just combine the jobs.
The logic, we have totally lost our discernment in most areas.
Yeah, big time.
So.
Yeah, check out our Facebook page. You can find the article on there, and while you're there, go ahead and follow us.
All right. Thank you for that plug.
Also, here's another plug. Check out Pseudology, because it talks about how the media affects your brain and how many psychologists, doctors, neuroscientists is it going to take to make us believe that it has an effect on us, you know?
You should look in the description below for a link to Pseudology. Also, it was reported the internet has become an abundant source of both sexual information and pornography that cannot be regulated. Online pornography is now a $1 billion a year industry. In a national sample of 1,500 10 to 17-year-olds, 10 to 17, nearly half the internet users had been exposed to online pornography in the previous year. In addition, unwanted sexual solicitations and harassment are not uncommon, although they may not be as frequent as parents feared. So, can you imagine half of 10-year-olds being exposed to pornography? I mean, I have a son who's 12. I have a son who's 9. I mean, you're just talking right at those ages. It's like the kids, they're happy to build paper airplanes, you know? And that tool of the devil just gets a hold of them.
I think I was 10 years old the first time that I was exposed to a porno magazine. 10 years old.
Yeah, around the same age, probably younger.
Yeah.
Wow.
But, you know, we're talking about media that you can kind of control, like you can not have a TV in your home or not have music in your house, but I mean, if you're a normal person that has to go to the grocery store, like literally every Cosmo Girl magazine is always at this eye level for a kid, and it's like a chick barely covering her nipples with a jacket or something.
And it always says, like, you know,
sex is the biggest word on there.
Yeah.
Literally, you look, the first word your eye sees is sex.
Yep.
So, I mean, you can't just, you're exposed to it everywhere.
Here is an article that I found. It said Nicole Crassus found that both men and women's magazines contain a single vision of female sexuality, that women should primarily concern themselves with attracting and sexually satisfying men. So,
do we have anyone that
lady in the
disagrees?
group? Yeah.
What do you think about that, Candy?
Can you read that again?
Yeah.
Sure. Nicole Crassus found that both men and women's magazines contain a single vision of female sexuality, that women should primarily concern themselves with attracting and sexually satisfying men.
That's infuriating.
As it should be.
You know, it's interesting. This is affecting women in so many ways. I was watching a documentary from the Heritage Foundation. They're saying, of course, this is not speaking for all of them, but some transgender people, their roots are from some trans men, okay? So
it's confusing.
Women who are transitioning to be men, okay? The roots of that is to get away from being sexualized, to get away from the stigma that's associated with being a woman and how you should act or feel or be as a woman. So this is insane. It's affecting people in a lot of different ways.
Yeah,
They're
that's
feeling that
scary.
societal pressure.
That's taking serious measures to get away from the cultural norm or whatever.
Yeah.
A really good friend of ours, of our ministry, that she was abused early on by her father and her brother, and she went headstrong into the lesbian world. And one of the reasons that she did that was literally to become a man, to show what a man should and how a man should treat a woman.
Wow.
It was really interesting. Gravitated her towards more of the sort of butch version of the lesbian.
So it seems to be two extremes. Either they transform or try to transform themselves into what they think a man should be, or they just go ahead and allow themselves to be slapped around and whatever by a man. Wow.
Yeah. So it's magazines like this, Teen Vogue and 17, we talked about this. These are the ones that are really one-sided and have that kind of viewpoint. But the one thing I want to bring out about this is that the sources that they typically quote are Planned Parenthood sources when it comes to sexual health.
Wow.
Okay. You're not going to find a wide variety there. It's pretty much solely from Planned Parenthood. And they're not painting the full picture of consequence, for example, from having a sexual relationship with multiple people. It's just, it's the Planned Parenthood way.
Well, it keeps them in business. They can give abortions, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I just want to point something out real quick too. Actually, when I lived in Los Angeles and I lived right at the beach for a little time, they were doing a Cosmopolitan shoot on the beach for the cover of Cosmopolitan, and my neighbor was actually one of the people that was working in facilitating it. So I went out to go watch the shoot. Really interesting because to me, the model was not very attractive. And I sat and kind of watched the whole process. They took photos of her. They brought the photos back. They worked them in Photoshop. And the end result was absolutely stunning. Wow. I mean, they made her skinnier. They made her cheekbones
the right pose.
Yeah, the right everything. And it was just like, wow. So you don't know how much these magazines are even doctored up. They're so doctored that in reality, a lot of the times people don't look like that.
Here's another journal I found. It said the pressure put on women through ads, television, film, and new media to be sexually attractive and sexually active is profound. While this is nothing new, research has found that women's representation in popular media has steadily become more and more sexualized over the last 40 years. And given everything that we've just seen, this is kind of like, well, yeah, that makes sense, right? No duh.
I find it interesting, why is the light only being shown on the women? I mean, who are the women having sex with, or who are pushing the women to have sex? The larger population is men. So this is going both ways.
As if the male has nothing to do with any of this.
Right.
Like maybe he wrote the script and directed it. And
All right, here's another article. It said that television, movies, music, and magazines contain a great deal of sexual content and little discussion of emotions, responsibilities, or risks associated with sexual activity. For example, sexually transmitted infections, birth control, and condom use. So, whenever you're watching these things, you're really only getting one side of the story, right? I remember some people told us when my wife and I first got married, they were like, look, if you're getting married, don't get married unless you're ready to have children, right? Because it's gonna happen. It'll come, right? And sure enough, about 3 months into our marriage, my wife comes to me and she says, we're pregnant, And so, ready or not, it was here it comes. But these magazines, these TVs, these movies, they only paint the quote unquote glamorous side, right? The lustful side of all these situations. They're not necessarily showing you the nitty gritty, the day to day. I mean, then what happens? I mean, you get pregnant and then what? Are they showing you, okay, now this is how you take care of a child?
Yeah.
What do you think of shows who do though? There are shows that like teen pregnancies or, children being born out of wedlock. There are shows surrounding that. So what do you think about those?
I think it's great if they show a responsible, if something like that happens, now it's time to, take responsibility and care for that child. If it's literally a show that's like, well, you know, you got pregnant because you went to a party, and but guess what? You can get rid of it now, up to 9 months. Now I have a problem with that kind of a show. So I think that as long as there is a clear message of be responsible. I mean, this is the part of life. This is how life continues. And so just to be able to try and go and have all that fun without the responsibility, there's a problem with that.
Yeah. So in the first half of this presentation, we have looked at a lot of statistics on music and things like that, where trends have been going in society. We've looked at what's been happening on network television and those kinds of things, and magazine. But in the second part of this, we are going to take a journey and look at what is happening in society morally, what is happening in society with social media and even pornography. What direction are we headed? What do statistics tell us? And are we changing? And if we're changing, why are we changing? So that is part 2. So hope you guys can check it out with us, and stay tuned for next week.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, click the little notification bell, and don't forget to click on part 2, because you're going to want to hear the conclusion of all of this, and it just gets crazier from here. But the proof is in the pudding, and the statistics tell us exactly where we're headed.
Don't forget to hit the thumbs up. It's a simple, easy way to help us out.
And share it with your friends.
That's right.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.